Hey everyone, it's Dr. Christine Kaczmar. You are listening to Smart Digestion Radio. This time, I'm going to be interviewed. It's a special April Fool's Day edition. Stay tuned.
Your gut told you to listen. Your colon begged you. This is Smart Digestion Radio with Dr. Christine Kaczmar, the all things diet, nutrition, vitality show for the wellness-minded.
Hello, welcome into Smart Digestion Radio episode 18, where the tables are turned on this April Fool's Day, and I am interviewed by my friend Valerie Shootman for her show, the Power Hour Show, and she is fantastic. We have a great time in this talk, talking all about GMOs, talking about digestion, enzyme nutrition. It's a really great show, if I do say so myself, and I really hope you enjoy it as well. And a couple things, if you want to get my 10 tips to tame your toilet to improve your digestion, head on over to my website, thedigestiondoctor.com. And over on the top right, you will see a place to just enter your email, and it's all yours. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the other side.
Okay, Power Entrepreneurs, let's get started. I am simply thrilled to introduce my guest today, Dr. Christine Kaczmar, also known as the Digestion Doctor. Dr. Christine, are you prepared to power up?
I am so ready to power up. I'm electrified.
Electrified. I love it. I love it. Okay, so, I gave you that short introduction as the Digestion Doctor. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're known as the Digestion Doctor, and maybe just a little overview of your business and where you're at now?
I would love to, Valerie. First of all, thank you for having me on your show. Really excited to be here. And a little story background on me is I've been a doctor for 14 years. My first love is as a doctor of chiropractic. Essentially, I got into chiropractic because my little brother, believe it or not, married a girl who worked in a chiropractic office. And so the rest was history there. But at any rate, I went to school in Georgia, loved it. And while there, one of my instructors is not only a chiropractor, but was a natural hygienist. And so they're really big into fasting. And so long story short, I was in the best shape of my life. I went running all the time, ate salads during, breaks between classes. And I felt such tremendous bloat and cramping and just discomfort in my abdomen. Sitting in class, I was in pain, doubled over. And so I approached him after class one day and he said, come see me on break. And so I did, and he fasted me for 8 days. It was like a 9-day break, and all 8 of the 9 days I was not eating anything. I was just having water, if anything at all, maybe some vegetable broth. No more than 100 calories. And so I fasted for 8 days. The problem went away after like the second or third day. I lost, I think, 10 or 11 pounds, which is a nice bonus. But the point was, I learned then that this digestive thing might have a little bit of a purpose in my future. And sure enough, it did. So probably about 8 years ago, I noticed I wasn't getting some of my patients, chiropractic alone, for things like diarrhea and constipation. And I remember hearing about this guy named Dr. Howard Loomis. And you know how sometimes, Valerie, you'll hear someone say something and then like maybe a year later you'll hear it again or something like that. That's kind of what happened. And so I attended his institute, sat down. The instant this man started to speak, he's also a chiropractor, by the way, I knew I was in the right place. I mean, just the way that they took care of us at the conference, to just how intelligent he was. And so I put what he taught me in place the instant I got home, and it worked. So it was the combination of me using the chiropractic aspect of things and the nutritional digestive enzyme things that kind of made me known as the Digestion Doctor. So specifically now in practice, I focus mostly on IBS, Crohn's, colitis, you name it, any kind of digestive issue. I love it. As I like to say, bring me your worst liquidy stool and I'll help fix you up. So, but yeah, that's kind of a weird way of going around about how I became the Digestion Doctor. But so essentially, yes, I'm still a practicing chiropractor. That's my first love, absolutely. But 90% of my practice is for the digestive realm, and I absolutely love it.
And it sounds like it all came together for you. Don't you love it when that all comes together and you're like, oh, yes, this is it. and you can just go take action on it. I love that. And I also loved what you said about hearing it a couple different times. If I hear it, 2-3 times, it's like, oh, wait, I've got to stop and act on whatever is appearing for me, because it's a sign, I think.
It is. And speaking
I love
of
that.
Yeah, speaking of signs too, like the when I finally decided to go to the conference, which is out in Chicago, I live in Michigan, I had just reopened a new practice. So financially, it wasn't the best decision for me to leave practice and go do that and spend extra money learning something new. And so I did that. But here's the funny thing. My trip home, it was in the middle of the summer from Chicago to Detroit. It's only like a 40-minute flight. I mean, you're basically up in the air and back down. It's a fantastically short flight. But every single flight to Detroit was canceled. I couldn't figure it out. There was no storm. There was no reason. To this day, I still don't know why all the flights were canceled. So I had to stay an extra day at my sister's, who lives out in the Chicago area. And so what that did, though, Valerie, is it gave me an extra day to take everything that I just learned and start doing some action steps. So I made some phone calls to a lab that I had to get for test kits for urine and things like that. I got everything rolling. And I started working on my first marketing piece. I have my first flyer drafted while sitting there in the airport, so that when I got home that next weekend, so like 3 or 4 days later, I was passing out these flyers. And sure enough, I would have never been able to probably get all that together that fast if those flights wouldn't have been canceled. So that was another sign too. It really, I never forget that.
That's just amazing.
It is.
That's amazing. And I find after conferences like that, if you don't do something with all that information that's rolling around in your head right then, it kind of loses its oomph, it loses its power, to enact on the information that you learned. I just went to Traffic and Conversion Summit in January, and the information was so fresh, that day or two after the conference. But now as time goes on, I have to refer back to my notes and get myself back in that space again. So that's awesome that you had that mysterious opportunity to go ahead and do that the day after.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you about the whole information. One of the tips that I use, because I am addicted to learning like you, I know you love going to seminars too, Valerie, is that I will put in the margin capital H/capital W in a circle. That's just my little short code for homework. And so all throughout my notes, if I put an H/W, I will always go back and find those and make sure that I check those off. And I give myself three things I must implement in the first 48 hours of returning from a seminar. That's always something that I make it just an accomplishable number, versus being so overwhelmed that you do nothing. So I just take 3 of my HWs and I make sure that I put them in play within 48 hours, and it really is easy to do.
I love that idea. I'm going to have to start incorporating that.
I don't know where I came up with the HW.
But go ahead.
I'm sorry. I don't know where I came up with the HW for homework, but that's just what I've used, and it's just stuck.
Yeah, it works. I love that. And 3 homeworks within 48 hours. I love that.
Yeah.
Like I said, I have a little tablet, and it has a left margin that's, about 1.5 inches wide or so. That's kind of like a breakout section that I mark specific things, or I write down what I would normally highlight. I pull those out, which is easy, but I love your homework. I'm going to start doing that to mark those, because it would be easy to go back and find those and then take action.
It is. And it's funny to look back too and see, I was talking about this. Oh my gosh, you kind of see trends in the things that you take away from seminars too. So you learn a little bit about yourself as a student when you see the kinds of things that you're telling yourself to do as homework. So it's kind of fun for that too.
Exactly. So let me hear, there's a thing on our show that I always like to do for both the people I'm interviewing and our listeners, and it's called The Power of Gratitude. So it sounds like you've come a long way since back in those early days. Who would you want to give a shout out and give some gratitude to? That, I guess I should say, the people that have helped you get to where you are now.
I'd love to. I have 5 people, Valerie. They're all teachers. So they are Linda Tibor and Michael Hardy. They're my 2nd, 4th, and 6th grade teachers. You might be saying, how come you just gave us 3? Well, Michael Hardy was my 4th and 6th grade teacher. These 2 teachers they're elementary teachers. Like I said, they just made me feel like I counted. I came from a broken family. My folks divorced when I was 5. It was terrible. It was scary. There's all kinds of yelling and alcoholism and all that junk. So I just felt like I had confidence with these people. So definitely Linda Tibor, Michael Hardy. And then my junior high teacher, my chemistry teacher, Dr. Glenn Charles, he has to be mentioned because I'll never forget being in 8th grade and him saying, when in doubt, answer enzymes. Enzymes are the answer to everything. And it's so weird that I remember that extracted comment of his, because now I'm an enzyme nutritionist, yet I still remember him saying that. So I have to give him props for that. And then finally, the second to last is Sandy Osett. She was my junior high for a couple of years, and then my high school band teacher. I played trumpet and marching band and jazz band and all that stuff, and she was tough. She was the toughest teacher I've ever had, to the point where she'd have kids in tears, but you know what? She was genius in that she just cared so much. She just wanted to extract all the good out of you, and she challenged you. I was scared. And she was kind of like a little mini drill sergeant. What were you going to say?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's funny. You remember the teachers that were the toughest on you. You don't always remember the ones that were the nicest, and certainly not the ones that were middle of the road. But those tough ones that really made you learn those lessons, and if they cared about you as well, those really seem to stick with you.
They do. And rounding out my top 5 gratitude peeps is Dr. Howard Loomis, whose tremendous work in plant enzyme nutrition has absolutely changed my life, my career, my community. I couldn't be where I'm at right now with my business without his knowledge, his perseverance. So Dr. Howard Loomis, love you, guy. I'm sure I'll send him a link to this and he can listen to it. But yeah, those are my people that I'm so grateful for.
Awesome. Thanks for putting that out there. And I always love to send out that gratitude, because it comes back so much. It's like the ripple effect. And I always like to send out new ripples everywhere.
I like that. Yeah.
Good positive ones.
Sure.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more. Can we dive in a little bit deeper about the enzymes and food and digestion and how that all works? I mean, I think of us as entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and small business owners, and we're always so busy and so stretched for time that a lot of times the self-care piece gets kind of shoved to the side. And actually, I think that's one of the most important pieces, because if we aren't in good health and we don't feel good, then it makes it really hard to do all the other things that we have on our plate, make our lives productive and our businesses productive, and be happy.
Yeah.
So if you can help us a little bit there, that would be great.
Yeah, I'd love to. It'd be my pleasure. So essentially, the number one thing everyone needs to remember is that there are no quick fixes. I mean, I hate to break the news to everybody, but there's no secret potion, lotion, nothing like that. What it really all comes down to is that we just have to make the time to prepare. And what I mean by that is we need to eat we need to eat less food that's packaged, canned, and that kind of thing. I mean, as they say, if you go to a grocery store, if you stick to the perimeter, you have a better chance of finding the things that are good for you, and that's absolutely true. Like the fruits and the vegetables, the produce, all that kind of stuff is around the perimeter. It's when we go down the middle aisles where we find everything that's been sugared up, packaged up, canned up. Well, why is that so relevant for my work? Well, if you've ever considered how they can take fish, throw it in a can, and put it on a shelf for a few years, the reason why that's even possible is because they've removed the enzymes from that product so that it won't rot anymore. It's basically dead, and it can stay in a can for a long time. So the food industry knows this, but they're profiting at our health's expense. So we really just need to take the time to make our lunch the night before. And there's a few ingredients that, if I could, Valerie, to try to stay away from. And that will definitely help your mind be more clear, less foggy. And those would be wheat, soy, and pork, just to name 3. I mean, I could go on and on, but those are 3 that I'm a pretty big stickler about in my practice. So you want me to take those one by one?
Yeah, that would be
Okay.
great. I have a quick question
Sure.
for you before you dive into those. So you said remove the enzymes and it makes the food dead. So it will last longer, essentially. Does
Right.
that also have anything to do with the nutritional value of that food once the enzymes have been removed?
Well, it's going to diminish some of the vitamins and minerals as well, but specifically the enzymes are going to die at the temperature of 118 degrees Fahrenheit. We shower in 120 degree water, so you can understand that that's not very hot. I mean, boiling is 212, so 118 degrees, not very hot. So what that does is that makes your immune system, or your gut, 80 to 90% of your immune system lives in the gut. It makes that system now deflect from healing your body to digesting the mess that you just ate, because the food you're eating is not alive. Granted, you have enzymes all over the place in your body, and you have it in your saliva and so forth. Absolutely. But you're making your body work that much harder when you eat things that are no longer alive. So the buzzword raw is a really common thing, because that means things that are still alive, or they've not been heated above 118 degrees. So for example, raw honey, it hasn't been cooked above 118. Like my next door neighbor, I live out in the country, I love it. He has got a little operation out in his garage, and he has a little temperature and everything, and a little gauge. I mean, it's really awesome science making honey. And they don't heat it above 118 degrees. I think they get into like the 80 degree range. So essentially, you are losing a little bit of the nutrients for sure when you're cooking things, but as far as my work is concerned, when you put that much more strain onto the immune system, it's only going to be a matter of time before symptoms result. Gas, bloat, headache, stiff joints. I mean, stiff joints, one of the number one things that happens from undigested food as a problem. In other words, going back to when I was fasting, mentioning that really quick, I couldn't believe how effortlessly I could walk around up and down the stairs when I wasn't eating anything. It's hilarious. So I kind of liken it like food dust. Undigested food is kind of like food dust. It just kind of floats around and lands places it doesn't belong, in your joints. Okay, you'll hear of leaky gut. Everybody has some measure of a leaky gut, but it's just going to be that much more leaky, if you will, when you're eating things that are just packaged up and canned and things like that, pasteurized. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, that you do lose some nutritional value, vitamin mineral wise, but specifically what you really need to focus on is how you're putting a greater burden on your immune system.
Yeah, that absolutely answers it. And it actually brought up another question. So if you have this undigested food sitting in your gut, can that be a source of bad breath or halitosis?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there is just so many things that you could have as a result of undigested food. But yeah, you have to understand too that your digestive tract, if you will, is pretty much a tube starting from the mouth to the anus. It's just an open hose, so to speak, on the inside there. So you could have all sorts of symptoms: bad breath, bloating, diarrhea, fistulas. I mean, there's all kinds of things I see in practice as a result that begins with a bad diet, okay? And then it's further complicated by bad digestion. You know, one of the things that always drives me crazy is when people say you are what you eat. I twitch when I hear that, because it's so erroneous. You are not what you eat. You are what you digest, absorb, transport, utilize, excrete, and so forth. You are what you digest, not what you eat. So,
Gotcha. I can understand how that could be a little pet peeve point with you. Okay, so you were going to tell us a little more about wheat, soy, and pork, and why you recommend taking those out of your diet?
sure. So let's start with wheat first, because this one is more and more people are becoming more gluten-free, which is great. However, still I caution people going crazy with the gluten-free, because it still is high in carb. But it is a nice alternative if you want, if you want something sweet like a cookie or whatever, and you have a gluten-free cookie, great. But one of the things that I try to steer people from is to replace wheat with don't replace your pasta with like brown rice pasta. Just stop the pasta altogether. If you're gonna have pasta, so to speak, have spaghetti squash, with some marinara sauce or something like that. But anyways, getting back to wheat, why am I so opposed to it? Primarily because it's so genetically modified. Also because it's been stripped down from all the really usable nutrients, like the germ and the bran. Those are the great parts of that grain, if you will, and they're pretty much gone. So, and plus we add, bleach and things like that to our wheat. We just have to be smarter about what we're putting into our body. If we're going to be business women and men and be successful people, parents, whatever, we need to understand that the foods that we are putting in our mouth, if they've been tampered with, colored, and all of that, it's not a good thing. So there are many reasons to avoid wheat, but primarily, to keep it short, it's because it's genetically modified, stripped of nutrients. Also, remembering that gluten is Latin for glue. So clearly in practice, I see a lot of constipation patients, so you can understand what that might do to somebody's digestive tract. I mean, I'm 44, and when I grew up, we would make paper mache stuff all the time with a little balloon, and you get newspaper, water, and flour. Okay, you mix that flour in the water and you would make glue, right? You remember that, Valerie?
I remember the whole solar system with the Earth and the sun and all the planets.
Exactly. I always made like weird guys. I always made these like mannequin looking guys. I don't know why I did that. But anyways, I digress. So that's the kind of thing that's going to slow down digestion, is putting glue inside of your system. Another thing for like an experiment if people want, take some cocoa wheats. Mix that up and put 1 teaspoon of it all over your stovetop. And then see how hard it is to get that stuff off of there. You literally have to chisel it off of there. So that's like another little science experiment for the audience if you want, for your kids. So that's wheat. As far as soy goes, soy is one of those products that is very commercially tampered with to the point where it just has no nutritive value whatsoever. And so people need to realize that it's robbing your body of zinc. A lot of vegetarians are big on soy, and I was vegetarian for 9 years. I was vegan once for 9 months of those 9 years. So I love the vegetarian lifestyle. It's fantastic for you. However, not including soy. And so again, why am I saying that? Because it's been so commercially processed. It is not the edamame. That would be okay to have. You know, edamame, the soybean itself, that's fine. Soybean. Yeah, the soybean's fine. The green soybean's fine. But the soy milk, the soy textured protein, it's not the answer. It's not a good food to be consuming whatsoever. It's scary. I have a friend who was vegetarian for 10 years, and I don't talk to her now, but I think she might still even be. Anyway, she lost her period for 3 years. And we went to school together, Cairo school together, and I remember we were both putting our heads together. We were both frustrated, Valerie, that we couldn't figure out how to get this girl to have her period back. And finally we came upon some literature that linked up soy, vegetarianism, and loss of periods because of the zinc. I mean, the zinc is a very prominent mineral for reproduction and so forth, and hormone. At any rate, we read that. She went to the drugstore. I kid you not. She went to the drugstore, picked up a thing of zinc, took it. The next day, she had her period. So I just thought that was so crazy. And I never forgot that story. So all that soy milk and all that, just stop.
it is. And I grow a lot of plants, and I'm big into growing food and landscape plants, you name it. And I'm really getting into soil. And what I read the other day, I have this book. It's actually a whole entire book on soil and how depleted our soils are and how to build them back up. But that was one of the key things the book was talking about in relation to our soils being depleted. It's they're being depleted of these minerals like zinc and magnesium.
It's scary.
And even though we just need trace amounts of those minerals in our body. We don't need large amounts, but when you're getting nothing in, then that's what causes these problems. Like you just relayed with the missing zinc from a basically all soy diet.
Yeah, and not to mention the estrogen component to this, where there's all sorts of science and absolute factual studies. This isn't a theory that these types of things in soy and estrogens are causing breast cancer. So there is an absolute fact correlation to that. It's not guesswork. That's absolutely true. So there's another whole issue to avoid soy. And then lastly is pork. I am a big fan of the paleo diet. Love that. But I don't agree with them when it comes to consuming pork. And here's my rant on that. Pork is very genetically similar to human. And this is what I say in my practice so that people find it memorable. And it's almost like eating human tissue. That's what I say. It's because we are so genetically similar. We take a pig valve, pig heart, put it in people all the time. I mean, we use their hearts quite a bit. And so that tissue, the pork tissue, whether it's ham, bacon, whatever, is very, very hard for the human body to digest. It stagnates digestion. So that's the reason why I'm not a fan of pork in any capacity, because we're so genetically linked, so closely resembling a pig in terms of genetics. So those are my three things: wheat, soy, and pork, as far as what I recommend people trying to be, steer clear of it, or very, very minimal occasions.
Oh, wow. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about food and digestion and using food to heal and growing food. I never knew that about pork. I somehow missed that through all of my research. That is very interesting.
It is.
That we're so genetically like pork. And so since we're so genetically alike, then our body doesn't have the proper enzymes and capability to break down that tissue as well. Is that the process behind it, or am I way off?
No, you're right on. So it is a little more difficult to digest pork than it would be other meats like chicken or turkey or something like that. So I do eat meat now, so I definitely recommend grass-fed beef. I don't care if it's been, I want it to be grass-fed the whole way through, and there's plenty of places online to get that now, but unfortunately a lot of, for cattle, they'll finish it with corn, and they just finish it with corn to fatten it up. Well, no cow is ever intended to consume corn. It rips up their insides. It's painful for the cow to consume corn. So you want to be looking for grass-fed, 100% grass-fed finished beef. So that's something that I tell my patients as well. As far as fish is concerned and seafood, you want it to be pole caught or wild caught. You don't want farm-raised fish. Farm-raised is a fancy marketing term. That means they've thrown all the fish into a little pool or whatever, and they're not able to swim around and be happy fish. They're all just in this gross environment where they're swimming around in their feces. So you don't want. Scottish salmon is farm-raised, by the way. Scottish salmon, you're like, oh, from Scotland. No, that means it's been farm-raised. Again, more marketing, perfect for your show, this marketing show. So you want to avoid farm-raised Scottish salmon. You want to go for wild or pole caught as far as your fish is concerned.
And what about like shrimp? I know they have shrimp ponds. My son lives in Hawaii, and shrimp ponds are huge over there where they're fresh. They have like roadside stands, and the shrimp ponds are behind. Do you have any information on shrimp and shrimp ponds?
I'm not a big shrimp eater, but it just goes without saying that it would be best if it were more in a natural environment. I'm not so sure how fast and how well they move around, shrimp anyways. So maybe it's a little bit different than a fish, but I'm not sure about that. But I would prefer it if my oysters or my shrimp or whatever were from the ocean and in their natural habitat. Yeah, I would prefer that. To me, it just seems messing with Mother Nature still.
I agree. You're trying to control every aspect of it, which is not always a good thing. For our listeners, I'm not sure all of them know genetically modified. Maybe you could go into that a little bit more when you were talking about the wheat and the soy. You brought that up.
Sure, I'd love to. Excuse me. So basically, what it all comes down to, unfortunately, is greed. And so what I mean by that is the farmers have been using chemicals to prevent pests, for pest control and things like that. So unfortunately, in so doing, they are tampering around the product, and it's just harming our insides. So one of the key ingredients is glyphosate. This is something that you'll see in a very popular pesticide called Roundup, okay? And it is very destructive to the product, whether it's corn, soy, wheat, whatever the case may be. It's not the same product. So genetic modification it's kind of packaged as, we're going to save the world from hunger. That's kind of what the establishment is trying to say. But what they're really doing is turning over faster crops for more profit at our health's expense. I mean, there is evidence that shows that this genetic modified wheat, it shaves off parts of our small intestine. I mean, it's toxic. And so it really just comes down to somebody wanting to make a buck in a faster way. And I wish I had a better answer for you, but genetic modification is just these industries making quicker money at our expense. I mean, the amber waves of grain in our what is it, America the Beautiful? That's not what wheat is anymore. Wheat is such a short crop, it gets nowhere near as tall because we're changing and tampering how it's meant to be. So any kind of genetic modification, just as it sounds, they are tampering with Mother Nature. I'm not a fan. I never will be a fan of that. And so you just have to be a more educated person. It's not like I'm a cynical person, and I try to be optimistic, but you know what? There are just certain things where I have to draw the line and say, okay, I need to be careful about eating this stuff. Now, in Europe or in China, they won't even accept some of our crops anymore because we genetically modify it. So what does that say? So...
Yeah, and I mean, even Costa Rica won't accept it. A small country like Costa Rica,
exactly.
And the U.S. still is. It's just mind-boggling to me. Yeah. A few things that I've read about that is that they've been doing, testing with rats as far as reproduction cycles, and after the third generation, then the fertility rates have gone down drastically.
Oh, yeah.
And when I, hear that, they haven't done any testing that I've seen on humans. I don't think we went through enough generations yet with GMO and genetically modified ingredients to be able to do those tests. And that's part of the scary thing. We were kind of being the testing grounds. But to hear that on rats, that by the third generation, the fertility is going down drastically, it worries me for our future greatly.
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's no question about that. And so you were mentioning before about the nutrition being affected with heat. Well, the nutrition is absolutely affected with genetic modification. If the listeners go to my podcast, which is Smart Digestion Radio, you can get right there by going to thedigestiondoctor.com/10, I believe is the episode, where I talk all about GMOs. But for an example, if you look at corn, organic corn that's not been tampered with or genetically modified has something like 6,613 or something like that, 6,000 something parts per million of calcium. The genetically modified corn has 14. Okay, so we're looking at 6,000 versus 14. So you are drastically reducing. It's taken a nosedive, your health, when you're consuming genetically modified product in terms of nutrition as well. So it might look the same on the outside, but there is not the same manganese, magnesium, calcium, and so forth within that product. So that's alarming. And second, as an enzyme nutritionist, this food is not the same, if you want to even call it a food. It's not the same so that your body doesn't generate the right digestive capacity or the enzymes to digest this genetically modified stuff. It's because it's not the same anymore. So it's almost like there's a missing enzyme from our body to digest this foreign source. And so that's also very scary, which will lead to other, ulcerative colitis and things like this, just by consuming corn and wheat that's been genetically modified. But you're right on the money with what you mentioned about the rat studies, because I too am afraid for future generations, because nobody's really, it's out there. You hear the conversation about non-GMO, but they're just going around doing what they want anyways. We're just quote unquote the little people, and it's scary. You have to be really mindful about what you trust out there. That would definitely be a tip I would have in the health biz. Just because you hear someone saying it that's of stature does not necessarily mean it's to be believed, So I've always kind of felt like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You hear back and forth, and you hear, it's going to cost, way more to label it non-GMO. But I don't buy that at all. If Europe and China are not allowing GMOs, then they're having to make non-GMO foods to export to satisfy those requirements. So how is it going to be more expensive? In my brain, I'm always thinking ROI and bottom line for marketing wise. Well, isn't it costing you more to produce two different products?
Yeah.
I just that bothers me a lot.
Yeah, well, because you're being misled. The public's being misled and lied to if they think that the answer is because of money. It's not because of money. In terms of why they're not putting the label to protect us, it's money in a different way. They want to profit in a different way, but it's not at all the reason why they're not doing it. They just don't want to do it because they just don't want to do it because they want everybody to remain sheeple. And so
that's a term my son and I talk about a lot. Sheeple, just following the herd and not even stopping to think about what's going on or what you're being told or what's appearing, just because, like you said, some supposed credible organization says something doesn't necessarily make it so these days. There's so much lobbying and hand holding, if you will, where money's being passed back and forth to say things and to skew the research results. And oh gosh, it's just a whole underground world that's scary.
I know, but see, that's what makes it inspiring for me, is having this conversation with you. And I just love that there is a movement happening where people get it, you get it, and it's just nice because we're having a conversation that's going to be disseminated across who knows how many thousands of people, or hopefully millions of people hear your show. I know it's going to be that successful, and people need to unite and get together and see, hey, you know what, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And that's exciting. There's a shift happening, or it's already happening, and that's how I choose to not get myself depressed and cry in my bed every night. It's to know that there are people out there making a difference, and that's really encouraging.
Absolutely. I heard Connecticut had passed a GMO labeling law, and I think I know California tried before and it failed. Washington State had it. I'm not sure where they're at with it now. Hawaii, the Big Island, passed where they could no longer grow any more GMO crops. So I think we're making progress, in specific areas. It's just getting that ball rolling. It seems like every time we feel like we're going to start to make some momentum, then something kind of stops us in our tracks momentarily. But I think that you're right. The more we can educate people and the more we can bring about that awareness, and not only just with GMO and the fight with Monsanto and all of that, it's the awareness about everything. Take a look at what's really going on. Does it make sense? Does it make sense just from one entity, or does it make sense for humans and the planet as a whole? That's what I find a lot of people are lacking. We've really kind of gotten away from that. And I learned this lesson a lot when I had chickens. I had never had raised chickens. I had gardened a lot, and I had chickens for a couple of years ago, and they really helped bring home that whole circle of continuity, where, we're talking about poop here. The chicken poop obviously helps fertilize the garden, which then you can feed the chickens the garden crops and any leftovers and what would normally go down the garbage disposal. You can use the chickens to compost it, and then they give you eggs, and it's just like a continuous cycle. And the biggest reason I got chickens was they are voracious bug control. So I no longer have to rely on chemicals or hand picking. They do the work for me, and they're way more efficient. I mean, it's a whole closed circle factory, if you will, where everything's taken care of, but all in a organic manner where you're not bringing in external chemicals or external sources. It was just amazing and really an eye-opening experience for me.
It is, and it's just so simple. Life is, isn't it? It's just a beautifully simple circle, like you said. I live, like I said, in the country, and my neighbors each have 10 acres, and I have 2, but I get to look at their beautiful 10, and they both have chickens. And unfortunately, some skunks got one of my neighbor's chickens, which I never even realized skunks would kill chickens. But anyways, so to kind of help him get started up again, out comes my one neighbor with a wheelbarrow. He gets some of the chicken poop from the other neighbor's chickens, and it was just this great thing. And I have a pond in my yard, and I hear the frogs in the summer. I have caterpillars, praying mantis everywhere. And so that's one of the things that you can determine about a society is how much nature you see around you. And with all of this Roundup, for example, I mean, there are people who, they are wonderful human beings who have no idea what they are doing when they spray this stuff around the weeds of their home. They're killing off the bees because these flowers aren't being pollinated properly, and the bees are, dying as a result of this, and that is catastrophic. So the more of these pesticides that people are using, we need to just be more accountable for what this could possibly be doing. So glyphosate, remember that word if you're listening, because it's in Roundup, made by Monsanto, definitely not good for any living creature around you. So, like you were talking about the soil, replenishing the soil. That is so amazing that you're doing that, because it's so true. It's been overworked. It's It's not the same soil, and if the soil's not healthy, whatever's growing in it isn't going to contain the right nutrients either. So it's all this nice circle that's really simplistic. There's no reason to complicate things. I haven't used one pesticide ever around here. Yeah, I get my grass cut and all that stuff, and that's nice, but there's no reason to want to overdo it with this. I had this one patient who he wanted to kill all his weeds, that he covered up all his flowers with newspaper and just dumped Roundup in between where the newspaper was. And I was like, Joe, what are you doing? Don't you know what this stuff has? And you know what? He didn't even care. So even though I told him what's in this and what it's doing, there's still going to be that section of the population that don't care. And that's disappointing. But there are definitely people who don't know what they're doing that will change. And so I think that's part of our job, is to kind of educate, and say, hey, are you aware that this has this in here and it's doing this? There's definitely natural methods, natural pesticides, if you will, like cayenne pepper and things like that you can use to ward off whatever. Eggshells, like crumple up your eggshells, put that around certain plants so that the grubs can't get it because they don't want to, crawl over it. There's all types of easy methods that don't involve nasty chemicals.
I agree. And what's happening, on a large commercial scale is they're spraying the Roundup and the later versions of Roundup, which they're kind of changing the names of it. But what's happening is we're now getting these super weeds. So in the beginning, Monsanto had said you'd only have to spray this, every so often because it's so powerful. And then what happened was the weeds that were there mutated and adapted, just like weeds always have and always will do, and now the glyphosate isn't as effective as it once was, so the farmers are having to spray more and more and more of it. Just a crazy circle that's not a good circle. It's a crazy cyclical thing that is spiraling out of control. And that's where I see probably the biggest education and problem is with the commercial farmers, because their livelihoods depend on it monetarily, so, and they think if they go to other methods that they won't be as effective. And how are they going to eggshell or cayenne pepper thousands of acres or hundreds of acres? So I think that's an area that organic farmers can help out with. There's so many. I could go on and on and on with this conversation. so many. But let's kind of backtrack a little bit from our little rant here.
No doubt. We're fired up, Valerie.
And let's talk about how our listeners, again, we're talking about entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and small business owners. They're really strapped for time, and they are truly thinking about their business. I think this conversation lends itself to transparency in your marketing and how smart consumers are getting it and continuing to get. So that's something to be aware of. But maybe what you could help us with is any quick tips, power tips of how people can eat better without spending drastic amounts of time. I know when I started doing all fresh fruits and produce, one of the biggest things that sucked down my time was prepping, prepping, peeling everything and slicing and dicing and de-seeding and de-skinning and all of that. But I'd be interested to hear what you've found to kind of like shortcuts to help still eat the fresh, non-processed food, but get it all together for your lunch and dinner quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that is essential is anyone listening, if you want to definitely help your health, you must take a digestive enzyme before you eat, because that is the shortcut. A plant digestive enzyme is going to help your food digest up to 80% after 1 hour of the contents being in your stomach, which means that your immune system is sitting, having a party, having margaritas, just kidding. But they're relaxed, they're happy, the immune system is, because a lot of the work's been done. So that's the first thing, is take a digestive enzyme before all your meals.
Do you have one that you recommend?
The ones that I use in my practice. But you can get one at any health food store. So, not trying to promote myself, just go out to the health food store and just get a good quality digestive enzyme. But as far as making it nice and easy, I recommend putting things like macadamia nuts, raw almonds, things like that in a couple of different Ziplocs. Like I carry a backpack to and from work all the time, so I have that with me, or I'll leave some at work. Or make eggs. I'm a big, giant egg fan, so I love Downton Abbey, so I did this before that. But anyways, I noticed that, sometimes Lady Mary has her egg in her little cup in her bed there. But the best way to make eggs, hard-boiled eggs, don't even worry about peeling them anymore. Make a hard-boiled egg. How I do mine real quick is just put the eggs in the organic eggs, of course. Put the eggs in water. When it comes to a gentle boil, turn off the burner. Put the clock on for 6 minutes. Once 6 minutes hit, put it under cold water, rinse them out, and there you go. And then when you take them to work or whatever the next day, don't peel them. Get a knife, whack it in half, take a spoon, and scoop out the egg. Voila, done. You don't have to worry about any of the nonsense with the shell. Nice and easy. Another thing is avocados. I love my avocados with eggs together. I think that's a great combination. You got a good source of fat and protein, a good bump for your 2 o'clock when you're starting to tank a little bit. Put a little Himalayan sea salt on there, or maybe a little bit of lime or lemon juice, something like that, and you're good to go. But basically, if you can do it, a really good trick is to have, if you don't have a kitchen at your work, make sure you have something in your desk or something like that so that you can have sources each place. So that if you're hungry, you got like a good can of wild-caught tuna there or something, you got some of your macadamia nuts, so that you're not always forced to go out to go get something, that you already have stuff right there. But then just making sure if you have a Vitamix, throw in some bananas, some hemp milk or something, and some strawberries, whatever. And that's another tip, is a Vitamix, because that makes the fastest smoothie. Also, your good source of protein. You don't want to use whey. That's something, again, I'm not a fan of. Unless it's grass-fed whey, then it's not as bad. But I prefer like a pea protein, hemp protein, something like that, with all the amino acid profiles for your smoothie. And then obviously a handful of spinach or something, or kale too, to get some greens in. So those are my little tips for like a pick-me-up when you're at work and you're busy and you got all kinds of good stuff to be doing and you don't have time to eat because you're too busy, but at least you're eating something good for yourself.
I love that. That's a great idea. And avocados are one of my all-time favorite foods. I hear a lot of people say for nuts and avocados and olives that, oh, you can't eat those. Those are fattening. They have so much fat. Can you talk a bit about the difference between good fat and bad fat?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The fat that comes from nature, whether that be coconut oil and nuts, extra virgin olive oil, avocados, you will never get fat by eating that, because your body's going to naturally, your hypothalamus is going to naturally be satiated because it's good for you. Nobody's going to just sit down and eat 12 avocados. Nobody, unless there's some kind of contest over in Coney Island or whatever. But you're just going to be naturally good after having a whole avocado. Don't even worry about half an avocado. Who eats half of an avocado? Eat the whole thing. Your body needs it. It's, in my personal view, the world's perfect food. Awesome source of vitamin E. It's good for your skin. It's good for you overall hormone-wise. Your hormones are made from fats and proteins. Eggs, I'm a big, gigantic lover of eggs. I know that it can be one of the more common allergens, too, in terms of foods. But if you're getting an organic source, usually that should be fine.
And they used to promote, don't eat eggs because of cholesterol, and it would raise your cholesterol. Can you speak to that?
Well, I can speak that that's absolutely an ignorant statement, because every single cell in your body has a circle of cholesterol around it. So you absolutely need cholesterol. And eggs in the yolk, eat the yolk, the poor yolk. That's just so rich in good nutrition for you. So where you need to be careful about getting high cholesterol is, one, eating too much grain. I have a patient in practice who her triglycerides were crazy, crazy high, and she finally stopped eating so much bread. And in my state, we have a lot of cultures and a lot of Middle Eastern culture in my state, and so there's tons of pita bread and all kinds of bread. And anyway, so she stopped. Her numbers are almost normal now. She dramatically has changed. And her cholesterol, was my other point, was way out of the charts too. It was like in the high 3s. So just by changing her grain intake, meaning she removed most of it, her cholesterol came down. So make no mistake, high cholesterol is not because you're eating a high, good fat diet. That's BS. That is not the case in most instances. Maybe there's some rare events where it's some kind of weird genetic thing, but most elevated cholesterol is not even genetic, Valerie. It's not even genetic, most of it. It's environmental. And so it may look and appear genetic because families tend to eat the same way. Families tend not to exercise. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
It appears to look genetic, but it is absolutely absolutely an environmental thing. So don't fear good quality fat. You will never be unhealthy eating it unless you're doing some crazy contest, like I said.
Excellent. That is great information. Like you said, I mean, there's so much misinformation out there. It's just amazing, and I think we have a long ways to go to educate people, but I'm so thankful for people like you, Dr. Christine, that can really give us this information that we so need to be able to make the proper decisions and put the proper food into our bodies so we can do what we need to do and be the best version of ourselves. I think that's what everybody should strive for, is to be the best version of themselves. And if you're putting food into your body that's causing your body essentially to turn on itself, then you can never be the best version of yourself.
It starts with that. Absolutely.
I always like to ask my guests if they have a particular book. I'm a big book fanatic. So is there a particular book that you like or could recommend for our listeners?
Yeah, the current book I'm reading right now is by Jay Baer called Utility, Y-O-U-Tility. And it's just about giving yourself even more away to your customer, and just giving them so much service and value that they see the authenticity in you, that they don't see you being salesy or anything like that. They just see you wanting to help. And I absolutely embrace that, and I started doing that with on my Facebook page. I started a segment about 6 weeks ago called Ask Dr. Christine Live, where every Monday night at 9 p.m., there I am for about a half an hour, answering anyone's questions. Whatever questions they have, totally free. I don't ask anything in return. There's no sales pitch. But that book really changed me. And I wouldn't say it really changed me, because I feel like I've kind of always been kind of a generous person, but it made me even more generous. And what's wrong with that? And so that would be a book I'd recommend for anybody reading, Jay Baer's Utility.
Excellent. That's a great resource for us. And all my listeners know that they can go to epowerhourbook.com, and I'll have that book listed with the name and the author. So you can go again to epowerhourbook.com and take a look at the book resources that we're developing there. Oh gosh, Dr. Christine, I have so enjoyed this interview.
Me too.
Really enjoyed listening to your journey and all of the stories you shared, and so inspiring. And gosh, we have so much in common. I can't believe it. Just want to very much thank you for being so generous with your time and your expertise and sharing with our Entrepreneur Power Hour listeners. I thank you very much. They thank you very much. And everyone knows that they can catch this episode by going to epowerhour.com/Dr. Christine. And I hope to catch you on the next level, Dr. Christine. Power on.
Power on. Thank you, Valerie.
All right.
All right, come on. So that was a fun interview to do. I really super enjoyed that. Thank you, Valerie, for interviewing me for your show. I look forward to its release, but this is the premiere, I guess, on my show. And thanks for the permission. So a couple of things. If you are on Facebook, because who isn't, I have a fan page. I would love to have you over there. We're 14,000 plus strong. Why don't you join us too? It's facebook.com/thedigestiondoc, DOC, and you could join in on all the fun, such as Ask Dr. Christine Live, which I will do Mondays at 9 p.m. I don't do it every Monday at 9 p.m., but I do it a lot of Mondays at 9 p.m., so that's a great way for me to answer your digestive health-related questions. Looking forward to seeing you over there. Thank you, as always, for listening. It means everything that you tune into this show, Smart Digestion Radio. Good times all around, and I will catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to Smart Digestion Radio with Dr. Christine Kaczmar. Have the most beautiful day.